Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Christine Barco. I am the local account manager for Patcraft Floors. We are a manufacturer of commercial soft surface and resilient flooring, focusing on sustainable innovation, performance, and material health. With that, I would like you all to welcome and join me in welcoming Associate Julia Marlowe and Associate Haley Wilson from DLR Group as they break down what workplace wellness really means, how others are weaving in sustainable and wellness strategies into the fabric of their workplace, and what collaboration between designer, researchers, and clients can yield. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Christine said, what we'll be doing today is walking you through workplace wellness, truly what that means and how to integrate that throughout the design process and have that truly reflected within the environments that you all have for your employees.
Clicker.
Oh, yep. I was like, wasn't going with my mind trick. So the agenda today, what we'll walk you through. So of course, we'll introduce ourselves, walk you through, design and wellness, what that means again, in terms of the value to the built environment. We heard a little bit in the session before about ROI. We'll jump into that as well in terms of the effectiveness, and then highlight a case study that we recently completed in Denver, Colorado, which featured integration of sustainability and wellness throughout the design process along with research. And then last but not least, some lessons learned. And really actionable next steps and key takeaways. And then we'll, of course, open it up to Q&A. So first and foremost, who are we? So I'm Julie Marlowe, as Christine introduced. I'm an interior designer and strategist at DLR Group. I have over 15 years of experience really curating and leveraging insights and research to inform strategies that curate the built environment and curated design experiences.
Hello, I'm Haley Wilson. I'm a designer and researcher within DLR Group, and I primarily focus in the workplace sector with a bunch of our tech clients that we work with.
And then who is DLR Group? So DLR Group is an international architecture, design, and engineering firm. We're truly an integrated firm, and that's one of our main points of difference within the AEC category. So overall, as a firm, our promise is to elevate the human experience through design. So what we mean by that is how can we improve and elevate the holistic mental, physical, and emotional well-being of employees, of people within space throughout all of our design facets. And then, of course, as I said, we're international, but we also have local expertise. So making sure that we're able to design and customize spaces that resonate with employees where they are. And then, as I mentioned, we're an integrated firm. So from designing the building envelope and looking at building performance and energy to workplace strategy, research, and development, or interior design and engineering, we work in lockstep with a lot of our teams to make sure that we're truly representing an integrated approach throughout design. And what that means from your perspective is that we're working hand in hand with those teams on a daily basis to make sure that we're working most efficiently, effectively, not only immediately, but in the long term as your businesses and your spaces extend. And then the R&D process, again, as an integrated firm, research and development is a core part of who we are and how we work. And what that means is that we're always up to date on the latest insights and research, doing our own internal research to look at what workspaces mean today, how people like to work, what type of collaboration spaces are the best type of collaboration spaces, what AV and IT kind of work to support those. So really having that expertise throughout the design process. And then, of course, having those tools and support systems in place so that we're doing that as effectively and efficiently as possible. And one of the things to note is that that also allows us with another level of adaptability and flexibility to pivot as goals or priorities or spaces change. So now that we've introduced you to who we are, both as a firm and personally, we wanted to walk through the value of the built environment. Why are we here? So the real prompt that we wanted to discuss today was, what does space mean to you? So the built environment truly has an impact on not only the lives of the people within your organization, but of the success of your business, the resilience, health, and well-being of your organizations, your companies, but also the larger community at hand as well. So how do we make sure that the built environment is strategically supporting those key goals of your organization? So with that in mind, we have some key steps to design, which is truly integral to a successful design process. So number one, first and foremost, is understanding and defining your organization's needs, values. What does success look like to you? Number two, developing the design process and priorities. So what kind of strategies would make the most sense to support the behaviors that you're looking to have within those environments? And last but not least, evaluating the outcome. You know, design is an interesting field because it has that human factor. You can design a space with all the research and insights to, you know, decide the perfect space, but when you introduce that human factor, the people within your space, you see maybe this collaboration environment could be tweaked in a different way to have an optimal outcome. So that is a core part of the process that we have on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome, thank you, Julie. So now that Julie's kind of explained how we do research within our own design process, I want to dive a little bit deeper into kind of the nitty-gritty of what we do for research. So that operates within two spheres. There's benchmarking and then there's testing. Benchmarking is a little bit more structured, so that's where we're establishing metrics to make sure that we can measure our success and early on align with our project goals and maintain those goals throughout the whole process. This is using our own personal data that we collect and then also third-party platform data such as well, which we'll discuss later on in this presentation. Testing is way more fluid. So this is where we're coming up with really, really cool design strategies that are still informed by research, but it's something where we have the opportunity to develop and discover optimal solutions that we can test throughout these spaces. So this can be as small as a paint color. This can also be turned into a seating arrangement and also biophilic designs such as daylighting and greenery. Long story short, this is enable for us to validate what's working, what's not working, and take what's working and push that forward, and then also put that into our future projects. So we're constantly cataloging every single experience and making sure that every time we get a new project, we're pushing that needle forward every time. Thank you. And so as we've been seeing, especially post-pandemic, people are changing where they're working, but also changing on how they're working. So in order for us to create workplace environments that are adaptable for those, we look at tools such as Work Modalities Toolkit, which we've developed internally within our firm. It's an evidence-based design toolkit informed by countless numbers of research articles that are backed up by peer review, as well as in the spaces and the people that operate within these workplaces that have been informed by these design principles. This happens within a series of exercises that we can do with the client and its employees, or a series of surveys. It just depends on the time commitment and how much you're wanting to invest in the research up front. And then through that, we develop space-type strategies in terms of actually taking through a dial and finding the certain percentage that we need within each of these modalities and assigning that to space. So it's really, really cool. We put that into a toolkit that's our own design guidelines. So from when we say, okay, we need 30% space, that's concentration spaces, we go into our guideline set and then start designing from there. And we'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. So here's one example. This is NRC, it's the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they're comprised of mostly engineers, so they're heads down at their desks doing calculations for most of the day, which is intense, and they need that space to concentrate and be alone and be in quiet. But what we did is we did a pre-survey, which is a couple of the surveys that we'll talk about when we're talking about RES, where we establish a baseline, and then from there we can find what are those pain points and move forward. And what we found out is that they're a highly collaborative group for engineers. So they're talking to their coworkers about 30% of the day, and they need that space to actually perform those collaborative tasks. So we made the push from 90% enclosed offices to 80% open office. And obviously there was pushback. They're like, where am I gonna do my calculations? You're putting me in an open space, acoustics are crap. Like, I don't believe you. But what we found out is that we were able to accommodate through huddle spaces, convertible office spaces, and a quiet library to still allow for them to be within that space. And one of the major goals was just making sure that we can reduce that footprint. They were going through a lease reduction because their lease was expiring at the end of the year, and we were able to reduce that space by 65%. So they were saving in terms of space, but also optimizing the space for that reduced footprint. Okay, great. So to talk about work modalities a little bit more, this is an example of collaboration. And as you can see from the top image, there are multiple different ways to collaborate. It is not just sitting at your desk, turning to someone and trying to solve a problem. You can do this in a huddle space, you can do this in a cafe setting, you can also do this in a really lounged out kind of space and relax and be able to collaborate with your coworkers. So really employees are able to choose their own adventure and how they want to perform that collaborative task. There's no one right way, and we give them the autonomy to choose which way they would like to do it. And from that, I'm just going to pass it over to Julie to talk about wellness.
So as Haley talked about, we have a variety of different internal benchmarks that we utilize and strategies to inform our designs, but there's also industry-wide third-party platforms that we connect with and collaborate with as well. So why does wellness make sense for design? How does it really help to raise and elevate the value of space? Well, as most of you probably know, we spend 90% of our lives indoors, and a significant amount of that is at work. So the environments that we're creating and having employees in on a day-to-day basis, it's imperative that they support their well-being. And later on in the presentation, we'll talk about the ROI of that from a business perspective and how in the long run it not only helps the employees, but also from a productivity, efficiency, and retention perspective. So as Haley mentioned, WELL certification, this is a certification from IWBI. This is something that truly approaches wellness from a holistic perspective. It has a lot to do with the built environment, meaning the spaces that we're creating, but it also ladders to organizational policies and how you work as a business. So it's truly looking at an integrated way of what wellness means from a design and organizational perspective. And there are 10 concepts. So some of these might be a little bit more straightforward than others, and we'll dive a little bit into them a little bit later. But from air, water, nourishment, light, and movement, so how people are experiencing this space, those interior environmental qualities. And then thermal comfort, sound, materials, mind, and community. So how people are experiencing the space themselves and how they're interacting with others within that space. And so right now we'll walk you through the project that we just completed in Denver, Colorado for Res Americas. Res Americas is a renewable energy company. They're actually the largest in the world, and they were moving from an existing space outside of Colorado, outside of Denver, and moving into Denver. They wanted to find a location that was a little bit more centrally located, not only to provide additional community amenities for their employees, but also to improve accessibility for their employees as well, and to attract new talent. So as we talked about earlier on in the presentation, what was really important was that we established the goals and the values that would be driving this project. And again, that's really testament and tentpole factor for how a project should run. So some of the key goals that Res had were to bring employees back into the office. So what that means, of course, is to just increase attendance in the office. And then, of course, to increase collaboration and connection with their employees, especially coming out of the pandemic. It was really important to have that face-to-face connection, and also foster different types of collaboration as people have been, living in the world of hybrid work. And then some key strategies that we defined to help to support those goals were really to evaluate the needs and wants of their space. So similar to what Haley was talking about in some of her case studies, we look to see what are the key needs and wants of the space and what are some of the strategies that we can implement to activate that. And then sustainability and wellness. Sustainability was a huge priority. They're a renewable energy company, so that was something that was a tentpole to their business. But wellness was also something that was really important to them. They wanted to make sure that they were creating a space where employees would feel safe and welcome and really thrive. And then also in terms of employee engagement, they wanted to provide equitable connection with their employees walking through this process. We all know that change can be somewhat of an anxiety-provoking or frustrating process for some. So how do we make sure that we're bringing employees with us along that process? And then last but not least, communicating the why. So why they were moving to this location that was closer to in downtown Denver. Why were they kind of shifting some of the office from, more offices, similar to the example that Haley shared with us, to more open offices, and what the end benefit to the employee would be. So taking a look at this floor plan, this highlights the work modalities that Haley shared with us earlier. So you'll see along the core of the space, so along this reception area on Plan South and then further north, you'll see a lot of those socializing areas where we want people to connect, to have those unexpected kind of collisions with each other and really to socialize and have a break. Also along the perimeter, you'll see the collaboration spaces. So that's really those spaces for people to come together. We'll have the large conference and boardroom, and then some smaller conference, huddle, and collaboration spaces there as well. And then along the core, you'll see that's where a lot of our offices are. And that was strategic in terms of making sure that there was equitable access to natural daylight for everyone. That was something that was a big priority. Also helps in terms of circulation to make sure that everyone was kind of hugged within this neighborhood feel. And then within the open office neighborhoods as well, you'll see these smaller high top tables, and that was there for more casual collaboration, as well as just high touch, high top services where people could stop in, and if they were there in the office for a smaller amount of time throughout the day and they didn't need a full workstation, that was a plan to help, again, encourage collaboration and connection, but still having a fluid space to be in. And then last but not least, there were some restoration areas. There featured a parents' room, a wellness room, and then down in the corner as well, which is the employee's favorite space, was a low-tech lounge huddle room. So it was a space that they could really go to, take a break, have some focus time, maybe some reading, and then go back to their meetings or focus work at their computers. And then this is some benchmarking for the plan. So as you'll see, the gray is the circulation space, and then we have the neighborhoods around the open office area. You'll see in the orange there, those are the high touch tables that I was talking about in terms of really creating a dynamic space. And we were very intentional about having, a desk share ratio hovering around 1. So Res Americas is actually moving into 2 levels of the floor, of the building, but they were only having access to this first level for this immediate need, and then moving into the rest of the space approximately 9 months later. So it was really important to make sure that we had enough workstations that they were actually using hot desking during this time to support their needs and having people come in, which at that point was for 3 days a week as their key goal.
Right, and just to add some things on, so as you can see, that number for circulation is about 36%, which is large, but that's okay because it's good to have multiple ways in which to get to a new space, but it's also good to cognitively set up your brain. It's a form of cognitive ergonomics, but basically mentally switch from one task to the other. So say if you're going through a concentration state and you're in that state and you're trying to switch to a collaborative state, you need that time to cognitively switch your brain to that next task and walk through that space. So that's why we allow for some more circulation zones throughout the space.
And then last but not least, the neighborhoods that we developed, they had those open office areas, as I talked about earlier, along the periphery of the space, and they were bookmarked by a lot of different types of collaboration. So you have conference, huddle, a smaller focus room, as well as some offices and flex offices. So no matter what type of work they needed to do during the day, they would have those resources, and every neighborhood had those resources. So there was also equitable access to those types of support spaces throughout the day. So now that we walked you through the layout of the space, we wanted to jump into what the feel was, what the look and feel and how we wanted the experience to be for employees. So the concept that we came up with was sophisticated rawness. So the existing building that they were moving into had a lot of concrete and dark metals. So we wanted to warm that up with a lot of natural textures and tones and really help to merge the modern workplace with more of the natural world. So you'll see throughout the design, we'll walk you through some of those strategies as well. So from a material palette perspective, that was a big design priority for us because again, from a sustainability and wellness perspective, we all know that materials make a significant impact not only on the budget of a project, but then also the life cycle and durability as well. So a lot of the materials that you'll see up there are actually Red List free. For those of you not familiar, Red List is part of the Declare certification, and that means that there are no Red List materials. And Red List materials are toxic materials, so things that will negatively impact indoor air quality. A lot of the materials we selected also had a high recyclability content or were 100% recycled. So again, from a sustainability, being mindful of what the material choices have as an impact to the overarching project goals. And then you'll see the natural and nature-inspired materials. So that's where the woods come in, the greenery, the biomorphic forms in the carpet. So biomorphic is really just like inspired by nature and having those natural materials or those natural patterns incorporated. So you'll see there are a lot of subtle ways throughout the space that we are creating an environment that not only works efficiently and effectively from a work modalities perspective, but also feels welcoming and supports wellness, which again, we'll jump into in a little bit. So this is where you guys come in. So what we're looking to do today is actually have a little bit of a fun exercise where we'll throw up some of our earlier renders for the project and look to you to highlight some of the key wellness strategies that support well. Don't worry, you won't be graded, but participation is encouraged. So here are some of the well concepts that we talked about earlier. So from an air perspective, water, nourishment, light, movement, again, that's where the circulation and active furnishings come in. Thermal comfort, sound, good acoustics, materiality, again, connection to nature, mind and community. Those are the 10 concepts that are crucial to well. And before we jump into this exercise, part of the process that we went through with Res Americas was to identify what certification process was the best fit for them. As I talked about earlier, they had sustainability goals, they had wellness goals, and there are so many different certifications like LEED, Fitwel, Living Building Challenge. Sometimes it's hard to decipher what makes the best sense for our project and our goals. And through weighing the pros and cons, financial implications and timing implications, we landed on WELL. Again, WELL was able to support not only the overall wellness goals of the project through the design of the space, but organizationally, so they could really reinforce to their employees and communicate back to them why this space was truly a human-centric space designed for them. So if we have any volunteers, this is actually a little preview, an early render of the reception of the Res Americas space. So as you'll see, you'll enter into the space, you have a nice reception desk to the side, and of course we'll share with you the actual space and the pictures and all of that. And then, yeah, so does anybody have any ideas? That's okay. Yep, there's daylight coming through. Yep, absolutely.
Sound.
Yep, acoustic sound, yep. So we do have along the wood some sound absorption qualities, and of course with the carpet. Anyone else?
A lot of different textures.
Yeah, a lot of different textures, materiality. And so we didn't put everything on this slide because it would just take up the entire slide. But you'll see nature in place. We have the plaster along that wall, so that natural texture and tone. We do have acoustics with that carpet, you're right. And then enhanced visual comfort. So this is something that you wouldn't necessarily see outright, but through WELL, there's actually criteria for you to meet through the CRI index, the color rendering index, for different types of light, which support well-being depending on what type of space it is, whether it's usable space at your workstation or spaces through circulation. So it actually alters the value and the quality of light that you're in. And then of course the wood, the different materiality helps to bring to life, the natural textures and tones. All right, so this is a rendering of the open office neighborhood that we walked through. Does anybody have any ideas for this?
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely, yep. Yep, plants, absolutely. So yeah, as you can see, there's again a lot of different strategies implemented on this slide. You have the plants with the dividers throughout the space. You have right here is the existing concrete of the space. And so overhead, we implemented an acoustical system that would help to absorb some of that. And it also reinforced that sophisticated rawness concept that we had established. You have the acoustical clouds over the workstations and high-top collaboration or touchdown stations, as well as the carpet. Again, to absorb the sound, we understand that there's a lot of acoustical concerns when you go to an open office layout. So how do you help to balance that with the needs and desires for visibility and connection? And then last but not least, one of the things that's really crucial here is that the workstations are oriented perpendicularly to the exterior glazing. This helps to reduce glare, and when you reduce glare at your workstations, you increase productivity and overall wellness of the individual employees. And then there we go, highlight. And then of course, active workstations. So we have those sit-stand desks, the chairs are adjustable. So no matter the size or fit, you're able to accommodate the workstation so that it fits best for you. And you can also, there are wellness benefits for standing throughout part of the day. So to be able to provide not only different types of workstations or, work settings outside of the general workplace or open office neighborhood, you also provide that at the desk where people will be working the majority of the day. And then last but not least, the break room. So the fun room, the socializing room. Any ideas for this? Yeah, absolutely. So for this, you'll see we have the green wall wrapped around the column for nature of biophilia. You have those different types of seating areas. So even from a neurodiversity perspective, we understand not everyone wants to socialize in the same way and connect in the same way, or maybe not necessarily has the time to do so. So what was really important with this layout was that we created a variety of different work areas, or socializing areas, where people could feel connected to one another, but they didn't necessarily have to be at the same table to feel that collaboration and connection. And then, of course, one of the key things throughout all spaces is good hydration. We all know, drink your water every day. So we had water throughout this space just to encourage that hydration, again, to work optimally. So now that we walked you through some of the renderings, let's get to the real space. So this is that reception area. As you'll see, you have that great view to downtown Denver. That wood slat wall kind of carrying you through. This is the reception, and then it goes into the break room, which we'll touch on. And then some soft seating as well for, connection. And then this is the other perspective. You see that plaster, that green plaster, that natural texture and tone. And then this is a custom graphic that we developed for Res, which is actually a wind map. So it's a brand new, right out of CES, vinyl printed, in terms of really helping to get that brand story and narrative coming to life through their brand colors. And then the break room. So you'll see the greenery along the booths, along the column, that exposed wood, high top table. So again, through every element, having different areas for people to connect and engage. You have the little cafe area to the side if you want a little private moment or just one or two. And then you have the high top island. And you'll see, again, those wood slats coming through. So you have a variety of different spaces to connect with your colleagues. And again, you're kind of surrounded by this natural environment as well. And then the open office area. So we do have the dividers. We actually switched to, instead of a felt divider, we switched to a moss divider to further incorporate those that greenery, as well as you'll see kind of the natural textures and tones. You'll see with the carpet that, the actual texture and pattern is a little bit more organic than perhaps a traditional carpet. So again, through every surface, making sure that that story is brought to life. And of course, all the material absorption through the acoustical panels, carpet, and different design elements. And then last but not least, this is the boardroom. So you'll see it's a little bit more elevated, a little bit more sophisticated, but we still found a way to incorporate some of the curves that we established in the rest of the space, some of the natural textures and tones, and of course, greenery. And then here's a little sneak peek of some of the other areas within this space, different perspectives, but especially this is one of my favorites, this wood wall. That really connects you from the reception area to the break room. And that wood area is really what is an identifier for what that space is and how to feel as you enter into the space and connect with your colleagues. So with all of that said, we understand that a lot of the process of moving is stressful. You know, the transition period is challenging. How do we make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success? And how do we mitigate some of the risk associated? So one of the key things that we did with Res Americas was we put together a change management strategy. And what that meant was that we not only put together a communication strategy to walk employees through the moving process, we also created a placemat so that everyone on day one would understand where they were sitting, where were the key resources that were fundamental to doing business on a day-to-day basis. But then we also created this welcome guide. And the welcome guide really ran through the narrative that we've already kind of run through in terms of, you know, why this space was designed the way that it was, how the wellness and sustainability strategies were really woven throughout this process. And then of course, how it was a people-centric, a human-centric design. That this space was very intentionally designed, understanding how they work, who they are, and to make them feel safe and welcome.
Okay, well, before we get into numbers, I just want to talk about the series of surveys we did. So for that work modalities exercise, we didn't do the face-to-face exercises that we did. This was still during pandemic times, and so we did this through a series of surveys. So we had 3 surveys with Res. Some of them are completed and some of them we're still planning on doing in the future. We had the pre-occupancy survey, so that's what I talked about with NRC, about establishing a baseline, making sure we know what's working, what's not, and what to move forward with from there, and then what to discard. And then we had a pulse survey. This is a month post-occupancy, and this is really getting the initial thoughts of how are people thinking and operating within the space, what are their sentiments towards it. Lastly, we do a post-occupancy survey. So this happens 9 months after occupancy. So this really helps us give a honest and true opinion of the space, right? People are settled in, they know the lay of the land, nothing's new and crazy, and they don't understand how to use it. So we're able to get clear results with that way. So today, when you're looking at the results, that's gonna be pre and pulse surveys. So first one of the major things with Res is that they were looking to increase their attendance, and therefore they need to draw people back into the office. What we've seen with this is actually a 48% improvement since our design implementation, which is really positive sentiment. And as you'll see with most of these slides, it's positive sentiment, which is making sure that we're doing our job correctly, but also employee satisfaction is higher than it was before. Next one is productivity. Around productivity, do people feel like they operate within the space and are able to conduct their tasks? This was improved by 15%.
And one thing just to add to what Haley is talking about, so as I mentioned earlier, they're moving from a lot of offices to a lot of open office. And as you all know, that's a big adjustment. So this is actually a number that we're specifically looking at for the post-occupancy, which will be the 9 months after the move-in, to see how teams have adjusted to that and utilize those collaboration and focus areas where they can get some of their other work done.
Okay, the next is the collaboration spaces. So as Julie was showing in her neighborhoods, there's plenty of opportunities for collaboration, and so we really upped the ante and added more collaboration spaces to the floor plate, and that has also improved by 24%. And then lastly, restoration, which is in my mind the most important, and that's just giving people to cognitively take a break and actually reset and gain some energy throughout the day. I know I hit a 3 p.m. slump and I have to like go get a coffee or a cookie or something to kind of kickstart my brain again, and it's really nice to allow for those times to really pause and take a break, because you actually become more productive if you do so. And that has doubled since our design implementation, so again, overall positive sentiment on that end. And then lastly, because I was talking about it before, attendance is huge, so this is a great number to celebrate and say huzzah for, it's increased by 300%, which is fantastic. And for those that are looking at the number and like, how the hell do you get to 300%? What's your math? It's more like 50 people and then up to 150 people, and Res has their own numbers for that, but that's just an example.
Yeah. So after running through the case study, what are some of the key takeaways that you all can use in your day-to-day process and working with your employees? So thinking about, aligning your goals and your values. So first and foremost, for any type of project and company success, aligning those to have a good understanding as to what your priorities are. And then secondly, understanding change. I know a lot of people coming out of the pandemic, we know that we need to change. We know that we need to evolve, but not everything has to be a huge one fell swoop. Sometimes change can happen with a whole new space, but it can also be smaller changes that you make on a day-to-day basis that will create a significant impact as you think about tomorrow and the future and what a whole new space could look like in order to support the behaviors of your organization that you're looking to foster. And then looking at elevating all voices. So again, what we talked about earlier with, the change management strategy and talking with employees, one key stat is that projects with change management are 6 times more successful. And what that means is that when you have a change management strategy, whether it's through communications or presentations or whatnot, employees are 6 times more likely to be happy and on board and really embrace that change. And then, of course, supporting your culture and your purpose. Space is a true reflection of what your organization and your company is. Everything from the sustainability and wellness strategies that we talked about to encouraging collaboration. This space is just a different representation of what you're speaking about on a day-to-day basis with your employees. And then last but not least, space matters. Space can shape the, overall experience of employees. It can improve their day-to-day experience as an individual, as an employee, kind of community overall, and it can truly just elevate the holistic human experience. And that's it.
Yeah, thank you.
So
guys.
we'd love to, thank you so much. So we'd love to open it up to any questions that you all might have, or dig deeper. Yes, I see 2 hands in the back.
You can probably hear me without it, but I'll put it up here. So I'm kind of curious, if I got the numbers right, you said there's 200 employees in this space, 124 desks. Does that mean that you're expecting people to come in and work without having a desk? Does it mean not everybody comes every day? How does that work out?
Yep.
Yeah, so they're working with a hybrid strategy, if I'm correct, Julie. And so it depends on, the numbers fluctuate every day on how many people come into the office because there's only a 3-day requirement. So they're accounting for that. And then some employees are hoteling versus having an assigned desk within that space. So we're really, yes, we're taking away some desks to accommodate for those new and different collaborative spaces, but it's also, I would say, team focus as well, right? There's some teams that collaborate and will only use those collaboration zones, and then there's some that may do a lot of that focus work that I was talking about and use the desking spaces as well.
And one thing to add to what Haley just said is that, they are moving into another level later on in the process. So right now that ratio isn't as high as we would ideally like, or isn't as low, as we would ideally like. But ultimately for right now, they're using the Robin system for hot desking and hot officing. The Robin system, it's a kind of workstation room booking system. So they're using that, and there are very, very few assigned desks for, executive assistants or administrative work and things like that need to be strategically placed. But otherwise, it's all hot desking. So teams can decide to work together. Oftentimes, depending on the types of work that you might have, you might all work together for a certain period of time and then want to be in a separate area with a different project team, whatnot. So there is variety. And then as you saw in the open office area and the neighborhoods and those high top tables, those have power, and of course there's Wi-Fi connection too. So we do have some people within their organization that are not necessarily coming in for the full day at a workstation. They're coming in just for a few hours, maybe for some meetings, and then they don't necessarily need that dedicated environment. So that's also part of what we are measuring through that pulse survey to make sure, are we capturing your needs? And a little insight for behind the curtain, what we have done is we strategically designed the space so that if they did find that they needed more workstations and less of those high top collaboration spaces, they could actually create more workstations. So the power and data connections are there, but we wanted to encourage this more collaboration environment and see how that went. Yes, next question.
So my interest is facilities management, and I've never seen a facilities department that didn't look like a closet. Or leftover rented furniture. Google did a study about jamming people together as tightly as possible to help collaboration. Does that still hold today? Like, especially with maintenance people who don't like to collaborate real closely. Do you find that that works?
I don't think I've read that article yet, but I will look into it actually after this presentation because I'm curious about jamming people together. I don't know.
The premise was put them all as tightly physically as possible, you could get them in one space.
Okay.
To collaborate.
I mean, I think what is alluding to densification 5 years ago.
Yep.
In San Francisco, we were putting people in the offices, and then suddenly now we are saying there's nobody there. So I think densification was the word that we were using.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Or professionally.
Okay. Yeah.
Also, you want your office spaces to look more like that.
Yeah, we get all the broken desks. But I mean,
Yeah.
you know, is there any studies on how, like, facilities departments can actually elevate their sense of wellness and value? Because when I worked for IBM, the real estate department was next to the CEO. But if you look at, like, public sector, they're usually in the basement.
Right.
Conditioning has power, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Care if I run with it? Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm actually working with a client right now that is updating their own facility. So they're facilities managers that we've been working with on projects throughout their campus, but we're also focusing on their own work environment as well. And I would say everything that we've talked about in this presentation should be reflected back onto the facilities management because it is a arm of the company, right? And it should be invested in as well. So I definitely think there are strategies that can be done and easy ones that can, as Julie mentioned, be done now, right? So like if you feel like you are lacking that amount of daylight within your space, orient your desks differently. If you think that you need more biophilia, put that within your budget or bring plants into the office. I know our office specifically, we go rogue and we just bring a bunch of plants in and have like a little mini forest in our office. So there's definitely opportunities to do so. And definitely there should be ways in which to invest in those facilities as well. But I would say all of this can easily be applied to facilities management spaces as well.
And to add to what Haley said, I think one of the key things that even in one of the case studies for NRC that Haley went through was that we did a pre-survey to understand how they worked. And I think that's really important because we know that all teams work in different ways. And through the research that we do, we're able to filter through by team or by department. And so you can see, oh, these people respond more to X, or these people like to collaborate more, or, you know, some people might collaborate 60% of the time and some people might collaborate 30% of the time. So their types of environments might look a little bit different, but certain things like the wellness strategies, the sustainability strategies will hold true for everyone. That's more universal. But definitely in terms of the density that you're referring to, it definitely can, you know, be adjusted depending on how they like to work, what's most efficient. But all the wellness things that we talked about help to actually, IWBI just put out a research study that productivity when you're in a wellness supporting environment jumps 10 points. Along with all the, you know, warm and fuzzies of, you know, making people feel better from a well-being perspective and, you know, mentally and physically and all those things. But productivity, absenteeism decreases, all those different things as well.
Yes. Oh, pointing towards you.
I have a question on. Okay, thank you. Question about the acoustic and the sound in
Yep.
the open office environment.
Totally.
We cannot solve that problem, especially when people on teams talking. Many of the meetings that we do, they are on teams, and they are same people in the same open office. They are on teams, and some people talk louder than others,
Right.
like myself. So how would you solve with that? Because that's, you know, we still cannot find a system that works.
Yeah. Well, and that's like the human factor, like we talked about earlier. You know, you might design a space, but then once you put the people in, some people, as you said, talk louder than others. Some people focus better when there's activity going around, and some people don't. That's also why figuring out what teams work best with what adjacencies and in what locations, number one. Number two, what's also important is that there are sound masking systems that can be incorporated. There are not only the absorptive materials, but what's also really important, and part of what we worked with Rez about, was what is your organizational policy? If you're going to be on a conference call and you know that you're going to be presenting and you need to be focused and you might be louder than normal or you're just a loud person, maybe that's the time where you should go into a focus room or a huddle room. Or if you have, you know, you're looking for your team to collaborate and you want that dynamics, maybe the organization should support, okay, the open office areas are traditionally for this type of work, but when you want to have a more lively discussion, please use a collaboration space. So it goes into the design of the space, but it also goes into the organizational policies, which might be a little more difficult to manage, but it helps to encourage that behavior and set the stage for what behavior is kind of appropriate for where.
Right, and Rez is a great example, right? We had the research that we did and we had the design implementations, but we also had the change management strategy, which is also helping with that office culture thing of, okay, well, if you're going to be on a conference call for, let's say, past 30 minutes, you might as well go to a phone room where you can easily hop in, or a huddle room and take that call and then return back to your desk. But like Julie was also saying, there's white noise systems that have been used that have been able to reduce acoustics. There's ways in which there's some really cool opportunities within furniture seating arrangements that include really cool sound absorption materials. So it's not always hard surfaces. Hard surfaces are the worst things to do with, and especially, as you can see, there's a lot of concrete and wood. Those are two great materials. They're really great natural materials, but they do push sound around, and that's why we have the carpeting, the baffles, the clouds, and then also with that slatted wood, we have those spacings in between because that absorbs sound as well. It pushes past it rather than just hitting it and getting smacked in a different direction. Does that answer your question? Okay, perfect.
Any other?
Do you do any work in the restroom?
So great question. This gentleman asked about work in the restroom. So there were base building restrooms, which we did not touch. It was just a few years old, so we left it as is. We did do gender neutral single-use restrooms, and we did incorporate a lot of the biophilic elements. So the tile had natural leaf patterns, like a terrazzo inspired tile on the floor. And again, they were amply used, fully accessible. So inclusive design was a big priority for that as well. And they were located near the core of the building, so equitably accessed by everyone as well. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
What about home office? I know it's probably outside of this particular purview, but I mean, we have a lot of remote workers in our company, and you know, we try to do everything we can for them. We have some hybrid, so you know, I can give them a budget and say, hey, go upgrade your office. But is there a better strategy to apply for home office design?
Yeah, and I think, you know, part of actually our welcome guide, which can be utilized and referred back to for home offices, were the importance of ergonomics and your immediate environment. So everything from the sit-stand desks, adjustable chair, what's around you has a significant impact. Biophilia, a lot of these strategies are just as important at home than they are at the office.
Yeah, and that question makes me super excited because that's something that we're actually working within our internal R&D group. So we're doing Work Live, which is basically another version of our work modalities toolkit that can easily be applied at home and also in the office. So we're working on those strategies and developing those things as possible. And I think there's multiple different ways to do it, right? And I'm just going to spit one off now because we don't have it fully developed yet. But I think there's things of having a guide. You know, if you want to have this effective workspace, you need X, Y, and Z things because you need to account for, one, your wellness. You need to make sure you're getting the accurate amount of light that you need. Your workstation is ergonomically set up for you, as well as any other thing that you find that they need, such as AV requirements and stuff like that for their employees. So that's really, really cool. And I wish I had more to talk to you about it and something to show. know, but that's something we're currently working on now, and it's really exciting because that is where we're going towards. We're seeing a lot of clients switch to fully remote, and we're seeing some are like really wanting people to come back in the office, and there has to be a middle ground, right? And I think that's what we're seeing with those hybrid setups.
And I think just to add to what Haley said, in terms of the AV IT, you know, nothing is more frustrating than when you're on a call, but you can't necessarily hear other people or see what they're pointing to if they're all in a room and you're not. So how do you merge those two worlds of virtual and in person? So with some of the more recent technology, like the Surface Hubs, having that ability to do sketches and have that seen by people on a call, whether they're at home or in another office, the IT component is, you know, considerably just as important as the health and wellness, because again, that sense of belonging and connection, it really helps to support that overall work. Well, great. I think we're at time. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.